Hello everyone, and welcome back to JAS Reviews. My name is James. On this channel I do reviews of both music and movies, along with the occasional commentary piece. If any of that sounds interesting to you, then please feel free to like this video and to subscribe to my channel. Well, welcome back to another episode of The Critical Corner. This is episode 2. I'll be going back to longer form reviews after this video, but there's just been so many movies to talk about lately. A lot that I've seen over the past couple months that I just wanted to touch on and everything like that. And hopefully I can provide you all with a little bit of entertainment during this very weird time. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started.
One day.
When some loud bragger tries to put me down.
What's her name anyway?
Stargirl. My name is Stargirl.
Okay, so the first film I am going to be talking about today, because this short review segment is focused on movies rather than music, is Stargirl. This is the first of the Disney Plus films I have watched, and it actually pleasantly surprised me. Now, this is based off a novel by Jerry Spinelli. I have not read the novel, so I'm not really well versed in it, so I don't know how true this movie holds up to the novel, or if it does at all, but I'm just going by the movie for this review anyway. And I was actually pleasantly surprised. This film was actually really charming and pretty good. It's definitely meant for a younger audience overall, but what really surprised me about this movie was how dedicated it was to talking about deeper topics like identity and just accepting who you are and the value of forming close relationships with other people. You don't always see Disney movies geared for younger children focusing on these things, and I think this movie was very mature in talking about some pretty hard subjects. It even talked about dealing with the loss of a loved one in a very engaging and often powerful way. I also thought the performances were really good. Grace Vanderwaal was a really pleasant surprise as the titular character. Of course, you all probably know her from when she won America's Got Talent, and this movie does use her musical talents to its advantage. There are several musical numbers in the movie, and they're some of the biggest highlights of the film. But Grace also proves to be a really great actress. I also liked Graham Verchery as Leo Borlock. I really liked his performance. I think he provided a nice balancing point with Stargirl's very erratic and mysterious character. His is much more grounded and much more relatable. I liked following him, and I liked following his journey, especially in his relationship with Stargirl and how together they sort of navigate the losses that both of them have been through. I think those are the best parts of the movie. Whenever it's exploring the relationship between Leo and Stargirl, that's when the movie shines the absolute brightest, for sure. Now, there are a couple issues with the film. Probably the biggest is that the movie is a little bit all over the place in terms of plot structure. There's even some subplots that really just didn't work for me. Like, there's this really weird subplot with Stargirl using her singing to somehow get the football team to win games over and over again, and eventually it becomes a sort of conflict when she stops doing this. And the plot felt really inconsequential, especially considering that there was a whole other plot dedicated to Leo dealing with the loss of his father. My biggest problem with the film was definitely all the different subplots that it did. I think it could have taken most of those out and honed in on the things that worked. But still, at the end of the day, this is better than I think a Disney Plus movie probably has any right to be. And honestly, this is better than most of Disney's remakes lately. It's a really solid film, really sweet, really touching. I think it'll resonate with younger audiences, but I think that older audiences will find something to attach with as well in this film. And that's why I'm going to give it a solid 3.5 out of 5 stars.
New coach, Jack.
Then you know your gifts seem heaven sent.
Is the team any good?
No. The last time they made the playoffs, back when you were playing.
Let's go, line up!
Your mark.
Alright, the next film is The Way Back, directed by Gavin O'Connor and starring Ben Affleck as Jack Cunningham. This story revolves around Jack, who is an alcoholic. When his old school calls him to become a high school basketball coach for a failing team, he takes the opportunity, and it seems like it's a chance for him to get some redemption. Now, I got interested with this movie once I read the story surrounding it, specifically how Ben Affleck talked about how this film was very therapeutic for him, and it was a way for him to cope with his own alcoholism and his own divorce with his wife and not being able to see his kids as much. And man, he delivers quite a great performance here. He is the easy highlight of the film, really the thing that makes it the most appealing to watch, and I think a great viewing. His performance is heartfelt, it's powerful, it's often heartbreaking, but you just really sympathize with this character even despite all the things he does, and that he's not always a likable character necessarily, but you always feel sympathy for him. And I think that's what makes this movie shine above your typical inspirational sports movie. Whereas other sports movies, I mean, they do have that hard inspirational edge to them, but I think this one actually has even more of one because of its main character. Now, I will say that there are still some clear cliches in this movie that are just sort of par for the course with a sports movie. You've got the failing team that is doing horribly, has never won a single game. You've got the players that are just not coming together. You've got the guy who should be the team captain but is too nervous to shine or come to the forefront. And I mean, you got all those things, and they all go exactly where you'd expect them to, but that doesn't really bother me too much. It is noticeable, and I guess it could be frustrating for some people who know exactly how these movies play out, but sometimes predictable doesn't have to be a bad thing necessarily. I think Affleck's performance is enough to make this movie worthy of a high recommendation. 3.5 out of 5 stars for me.
Welcome to Schism.
Alright, next film is a bit of an odd one. It's called Guns Akimbo. I hadn't really heard anything about this movie much beyond its sort of intriguing trailer. The movie just doesn't really work for me. Let me explain why. Now, I will say that the first part of the movie works, where they're establishing Miles, Daniel Radcliffe's character, as this sort of pathetic loser who sits in his basement all the time just typing troll comments to people online, and he's living in this sort of similar world to ours, but also sort of different, where there's this underground society that basically puts on killing for entertainment for people, and people love watching it. Miles basically types in troll comments on this underground world's dark web website, and eventually he gets found by them, and they basically knock him out, and then they attach a gun to his hands, and all of a sudden, he's a part of the show. The character's name is Nyx. She's played by Samara Weaving, and she sort of has a weird backstory of her own, and she's basically coming after Radcliffe, and he's trying to run away from her, all the while wanting to take down this company who has also taken his ex-girlfriend hostage. What works about this movie? Well, like I said, the beginning parts do work. I think there was some potentially good satire in here of the internet and internet culture and how that works, but eventually the satire gets really confusing and really bogged down in just trying to say way too many things, and in that way just not saying nearly enough. Also, there's a lot of this dark, edgy humor in the movie that is mainly just frustratingly bad. Also frustrating to me is that Daniel Radcliffe and Samara Weaving's characters have great chemistry on screen, but the movie rarely takes advantage of this. There's barely any time when they're on screen together. I'd say they only got about 10 minutes of screen time together in total, and there should have been more. The action was terrible. That's what really hurt this movie, because this movie is first and foremost an action movie, and its action scenes suffer terribly. It's just because of all the crazy camera movement. I think they're trying to imitate the likes of Mad Max, or even Lee Whannell's Upgrade to an extent, with how they're using the camera to make the movie seem more choreographed, but instead it comes across as really nauseating and really over the top. I just did not care for this movie that much. Radcliffe and Weaving gave great performances, and it was fun to watch them, but so many other elements made this movie really suffer, and the ending was super underwhelming. 2 out of 5 stars. I don't really recommend this one at all.
Then everything just...
Right, next on the docket is a very intriguing movie called Colors Out of Space. This was based off a H.P. Lovecraft novel, and basically it takes place at this one home out in the middle of the country, and this family basically experiences a meteorite hitting their home, seemingly unexplained, and this meteorite causes all sorts of weird, bizarre things to happen. I really liked this film. I loved how weird it was. I loved how dedicated it was to just going for the bizarre imagery, the bizarre ideas. I mean, Nicolas Cage is here, and when you have Nicolas Cage in a movie, there's bound to be some bizarre things happening. This is one of Nicolas Cage's better performances. I wouldn't say it's quite as good as his more recent film, Mandy, but I did like what he did here. And I think he did a good job of transitioning from the more grounded and in-control father figure to just being absolutely deranged and psychotic. I specifically thought Braden Meyer as the brother of the family was really good. I thought his performance was nice and grounded and sort of convincingly normal in the midst of the rest of the family members who were all very weird or very off-kilter in their own ways. And I appreciated the weird and off-kilter family members as well. I just appreciate that Meyer really gave a more unique performance and that he was playing his character more straight-laced and everything like that. I also thought Madeline Arthur was a really strong main character as Lavinia. She was very intriguing. Her connections with practicing occult stuff and whatnot really sort of connected very cleverly to how the story plays out and made sense. And I appreciated all the other characters too. I think there was a pretty interesting cast here. But what really sets this movie above and beyond is its visuals. Man, this movie is often gorgeous to look at or gorgeously terrifying to look at, because there is some really pretty scary imagery here that is often shocking. I do like how this movie just dedicated to its weirdness. There's so many bizarre things that happen here, and that in other movies would be something where you'd turn the movie off because it's so absurd, but in the context of this film, it just works, really. Now, there are a couple of things that don't exactly work about the film. I will say that it tries to change, like, movie genres a couple times. Like, it works best when it stays specifically to the sci-fi or the sci-fi horror genre, but there's times when it becomes a noir, and sometimes when it even becomes almost an absurdist comedy, and I think when it goes those routes, it doesn't work quite as well. I did enjoy this movie a lot. It's one of my top favorites of the year so far, and I'll give it a really strong 3.5 out of 5 stars. Almost a 4, but I haven't quite dedicated to giving it that higher rating just yet.
Sarah? Hey. Brian's new roommate is single.
Hi.
I'm Darren. I really like your dress.
Like your shirt.
There's something so exciting about you.
Okay, so this next movie, I don't really have much to say about. It's Horse Girl. The biggest positive I can say for this movie is that Alison Brie did a great job in the lead role. I like her in almost anything she's in at this point. I think she's a really compelling actress, and I think she always is super dedicated to whatever role she plays and just making the character feel as real and well realized as possible. And I appreciate that she made this odd and very bizarre character actually pretty relatable. Now, I will say what really hurts this movie is that I think it's just sort of incoherent. Now, I do like when the plot isn't revealing everything to you. I do appreciate when things are left mysteries. But at the end of the day, I'm not really quite sure what this movie was trying to say. I mean, the movie was sort of cool when it was talking about this idea that Brie's character, Sarah, has a clone. Like, she's convinced she has a clone following her, and even the movie does provide evidence that this is probably true. But then the film goes a totally different route. Also, I feel like most of the side performances were pretty underwhelming. Debbie Ryan was not good in this movie at all. I wasn't ever convinced by her. Molly Shannon as Joan was pretty good, but I don't think the movie did enough with her character. And most of the other characters here that they're trying to give some important weight to feel more like just extras you'd see in any other movie. They're not very compelling, and there's not much reason for you to invest in them. Pretty mediocre film. Not the best, not the worst. 2.5 out of 5 stars. I would say you can watch it if you're curious, but otherwise, you might want to stay away from this one. That's all I'm saying.
Ambrose McLaren. Oh my god.
Dear Laura Jean, I couldn't believe when I opened that letter and it was from you. It's been what, 5 years?
Alright, next up on the docket is a Netflix original. Horse Girl was also a Netflix original, but this is another one. To All the Boys, P.S. I Still Love You. This is the sequel to All the Boys I Loved Before. I was actually pleasantly surprised with that first movie. I'm not usually a big fan of like YA romance novels. They're not really my thing. But that first movie was actually legitimately charming and had a lot of sweet moments in it and took its relationship seriously. It didn't make its teen characters cliches. Now the sequel, on the other hand, a bit underwhelming in my opinion. Personally, I'm not really a big fan of love triangles, and that's what this film focuses on. It has Noah Centinneo's character in competition with another character named John Ambrose, played really well by Jordan Fisher. I did think John Ambrose was a great character, and actually sort of fun to watch, but I just didn't really like the love triangle aspect of it. It just wasn't as interesting to me. This film almost sort of makes you not want Centineo and Condor's characters to get together at the end of the day, because John Ambrose is actually a little bit more charming than Centinneo's character, at least in my opinion, and that's a bit of a problem to me. I think they should keep the main romance, the one you're supposed to be rooting for, a little bit more charming. Another big problem was the amount of music this film used. I mean, it used music as almost its primary source for emotion. Almost every couple of minutes there was a musical break or a montage scene, and it started becoming annoying and really predictable after a while, and it lost its charm. There's some really cheesy moments in this film that do feel like something you'd see in your typical YA romance novel. There's some cringe-worthy lines, whereas in the last movie I felt like those moments were mostly not present at all. Overall, this movie was, at the end of the day, just sort of forgettable and more like your cliched YA romance novel, which was disappointing to me considering how the first film I felt was a tier above most of those film types. I was underwhelmed by this. I don't know if Netflix will make a third one. They probably will, since there is a third book as well. It wouldn't surprise me. Hopefully it'll be better than this one. 2.5 out of 5 stars.
Dearly beloved friends, we gather here in this.
Alright, the last film is one I've seen more recently. In fact, just a couple days ago. It's Emma. This is based off a Jane Austen film, and it's about this upper-class woman named Emma Woodhouse, who is a little bit selfish, but she doesn't quite realize that she is, and she doesn't realize how privileged she is, and she basically spends her time trying to get her friends together or get people married together, even though it often ends up more disastrous than it does good. I really appreciated this movie. I think it has an underrated charm to it and a real likability to it. While this movie wasn't as funny as I was expecting it to be, I did appreciate the more dramatic aspects of it. I think that this film takes its central premise almost really seriously, even though when you look at it from the outside it seems very frivolous and very silly. In fact, this film almost reminded me of the Downton Abbey movie, where you know in your mind that the plot isn't that big of a deal, but because it's a big deal to the characters, you do care more. What also helps this film a lot is the really great performance from Anya Taylor-Joy as the titular character. She is excellent in playing this role. She really embodies this role, and she just has a lot of fun with it, in my opinion. I just really liked what she did with the role. I thought she brought so much charm to it, and a little bit of a snobbishness to it, which is perfect for this character's type. I also thought Johnny Lynn provided a good counterpart to Taylor-Joy as Mr. Knightley, her clear love interest, and I like how his character served the role of basically making Emma realize that how she was acting was wrong, but that he still loved her despite all that. There's just a lot of good stuff to commend here. The costumes were beautiful, the camera work was very nice and sweeping and created this elegant feel to the movie. If there was one problem, I would say that the beginning parts of the movie, I almost had no idea what was going on, because almost too much exposition was being dumped on you at one time. But once things really start picking up, once Emma is starting to help her friend with her friend's romantic interest, that's when the film really starts to engage you, and I would advise you to stay on for that time, because when that happens, the movie really starts becoming a lot more interesting. Still, this was a really fun film to watch, and I just appreciated what it did with Jane Austen's work. Yeah, it was just a lot of fun to watch. 3.5 out of 5 stars. So there was episode 2 of The Critical Corner. How did you all feel about any of the movies I talked about? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you appreciate what I'm doing here, be sure to leave a like on the video and to subscribe to my channel for future content. Until then, I will see you all in the next video.